Welcome to our channel. Today we'll bring you one of the most powerful and emotional stories in the Bible, the story of Esther, the young woman who became queen in a foreign land and dared to risk her own life to save her people. A story filled with courage, betrayal, and an unexpected turnaround that changed the destiny of a nation. Stay with us until the end. And if these stories inspire you, don't forget to follow our channel for more journeys of faith and hope. The Persian Empire stretched as far as the eyes could see, a kingdom of immense wealth and ruthless power. Its capital, Susa, pulsed with life, merchants shouting in markets, soldiers marching in disciplined order, courtiers whispering intrigues in gilded halls. Yet beneath the grandeur, shadows lingered, pride, ambition, and the fragile balance of power that could shift with a single word from the king. King Xerxes, known for his temper and grandeur, had dismissed his former queen in a moment of anger, leaving the throne beside him empty. The empire needed a new queen, not just for companionship, but as a symbol of authority, beauty, and strength. Decrees went out across the provinces, summoning young women of beauty and grace to the palace. Among them, one name would echo through history: Esther. But Esther was no royal daughter, no heir of noble blood. She was an orphan. Her parents had died when she was young, leaving her in the care of her cousin Mordecai, a Jewish exile living quietly in the empire. Mordecai raised her as his own, teaching her the traditions of their people, reminding her that though they lived far from Jerusalem, they still belonged to the God of Israel. When Esther was taken to the palace, it was not by choice but by decree. She stepped into a world of luxury she had never known: perfumes, silken robes, marble corridors, and whispers of competition among the other women brought to Susa. Each was given months of preparation, oils, spices, training in etiquette, for the moment they would be presented before the king. But what set Esther apart was not her outward beauty, though she was striking even among the most adorned, was her quiet strength, her grace in silence, her ability to listen more than she spoke. Where others sought attention, Esther carried humility. Where others flaunted jewels, she carried dignity. The servants noticed, and word spread quickly through the palace that this young woman from an exiled people had something no one could quite define: favor. When her time came to stand before the king, Esther did not demand gowns of excessive gold, nor request extravagant adornments. She took only what was suggested by Hege, the eunuch who oversaw the women. And in that simplicity, she shone brighter than all. The king, accustomed to flattery and spectacle, saw in Esther something different. Her presence calmed the room. Her eyes carried both strength and vulnerability. When she bowed, it was not the act of one desperate for power, but of someone who knew who she was. Xerxes, captivated, placed the crown upon her head, and so Esther, the orphan girl raised in exile, became queen of the most powerful empire of her time. But the crown was not the end of her story. It was the beginning. For within the golden walls of the palace, danger brewed. Unbeknownst to Esther, her people were being targeted, hatred rising like a dark tide through the whispers of a man named Haman, the king's advisor, whose pride would soon endanger thousands. For now, Esther remained silent about her origins. Mordecai had instructed her not to reveal her Jewish identity, and she obeyed. She walked the marble halls carrying a secret that could both condemn her and save her nation. And though she did not yet know it, the weight of destiny had already settled upon her shoulders. The story of Esther had only begun. The palace of Susa was a place of brilliance, but beneath the golden pillars and jeweled walls, the air was thick with ambition and fear. Among the king's closest officials was a man named Haman, whose pride rose higher than the palace towers. Elevated to a position second only to King Xerxes, Haman craved not just authority, but worship. As he walked through the courtyards, officials bowed low before him, servants lowered their gaze, nobles bent their knees. But one man refused to bow: Mordecai the Jew, who sat daily at the king's gate. His refusal was not rebellion against Xerxes, but devotion to a greater king, the God of Israel. Haman noticed at first it was a flicker of annoyance, but day after day as he passed the gate and saw Mordecai unmoved, his annoyance festered into rage. To him this single act of defiance was unbearable, a stain on his honor. But killing one man was not enough. Haman's hatred reached beyond Mordecai. It stretched like poison toward an entire people. He began to weave his plot with cunning words. Entering the king's chamber, Haman bowed low, his face a mask of loyalty, while his heart pulsed with malice. "O king," he said smoothly, "there is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of all other people, and they do not keep the king's laws. It is not in your interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will contribute 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury for those who carry out this business." The king, accustomed to trust the counsel of his highest officials, handed Haman his signet ring, the seal of absolute authority. With it, Haman wrote letters to every province of the empire, carried swiftly by couriers on horses. The decree was clear and merciless. On the 13th day of the 12th month, all Jews, young and old, women and children, were to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated in one single day. Their possessions would be plundered. Across the empire, confusion spread. Markets buzzed with rumors, families whispered in fear, and in Jewish homes, despair settled like a heavy fog. In Susa itself, the news struck like thunder. People did not understand why such cruelty was ordered, yet no one dared to question it. Mordecai tore his clothes, clothed himself in sackcloth and ashes, and cried out loudly in the city square. His lament echoed through the streets until it reached the palace gates, but none were allowed to enter dressed in mourning. Word of his grief spread quickly, reaching the ears of Esther through her attendants. She sent garments for Mordecai to change, but he refused them. Finally, through messengers, Mordecai sent Esther the full truth: the decree of death, the seal of the king, the money offered by Haman, and the date that loomed like a shadow over her people. He urged her, "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Those words pierced Esther's heart like a blade. Until then, she had hidden her identity, walking carefully among Persians who saw her only as queen. But now, the time of silence was ending. She was not only queen of Persia, she was a daughter of Israel, and the weight of her crown suddenly felt heavier than ever. The palace walls seemed higher than ever as Esther walked through them, carrying a secret that pressed heavier with each passing day. Outside, her people mourned, their voices lifted in cries that pierced the night. Inside, silence wrapped around her like chains. She was queen, yes, but what power was a crown if her lips remained sealed? The decree of death hung over the Jews like a sword suspended by a thread. And though no one in the palace dared whisper the word genocide, the tension in the air told the truth. Every servant's glance, every noble's smirk carried a weight Esther could not ignore. But breaking a silence meant risking everything. Approaching the king without being summoned was a death sentence. Persian law was clear. No one, not even the queen, could step into Xerxes' presence uninvited. Only if he extended his golden scepter would the intruder live. Otherwise, execution was swift and unquestioned. Mordecai's words burned in Esther's mind. "Do not think you will escape in the king's house. Who knows if you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" For nights she lay awake, torn between fear and duty. Could she really risk her life? Could she face Xerxes' wrath, knowing one wrong step could end her reign and her life in an instant? And yet, could she live with herself if she did nothing and watched her people vanish? At last, Esther sent a reply to Mordecai: "Go, gather all the Jews in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." Her resolve brought strength to her trembling heart. For the next 3 days, Esther stripped herself of royal luxury. No feasts, no perfumes, no silks. She bowed in silence with her servants, crying to the God of her fathers, the same God who had delivered Israel from Egypt, who had parted seas and silenced lions. Would he hear her now, in a foreign palace, as one young woman dared to stand between a king and a nation? On the 3rd day, she rose from her fast. Her face was pale, but her eyes carried fire. She clothed herself in her royal robes, every fold of fabric trembling with meaning. Her steps echoed through the marble floors as she approached the inner court. Beyond the great doors, the king sat on his throne, robed in purple, the golden crown glinting in the light. Esther's heart thundered. Each step felt like crossing a battlefield. The law of Persia loomed over her like a blade. One motion of Xerxes' hand could end it all. The guards stiffened as she entered uninvited, their hands tightening on their spears. Gasps rippled through the court. Xerxes looked up. The room froze. His eyes met Esther's. A long, breathless silence filled the hall. Would he rise in fury? Would he signal her death? Then, slowly, the king extended his golden scepter toward her. The hall exhaled in relief. Esther stepped forward, touching the tip of the scepter. She had lived this time. "What is it, Queen Esther?" the king asked, his voice softened by curiosity. "What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given to you." The moment had come. She could have spoken then, could have revealed Haman's plot and begged for mercy for her people. But wisdom guided her tongue. Instead she said, "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." The court stirred with surprise. Haman's chest swelled with pride at the honor. Xerxes agreed at once. And so the stage was set not yet for revelation, but for strategy. Esther would not waste her chance. She would wait for the perfect moment, when the trap would spring, and truth would strike like thunder. But until then, the silence remained. And silence, if misused, could still kill. The palace of Susa glittered that evening with anticipation. Golden lamps flickered, casting light across silk drapes and carved ivory tables. A banquet unlike any other was prepared not for the nobles of the empire, nor for foreign dignitaries, but for 2 men alone, the king and his most trusted advisor, Haman. And at the center of it all sat Esther, veiled in royal grace, yet carrying the weight of a secret ready to shatter the empire's peace. For days she had fasted, for nights she had prayed. And now, the moment had come. yet her heart still trembled with the enormity of what she was about to do. To accuse Haman meant accusing the king himself of being deceived. One wrong word, one misstep, could still cost her life. The banquet began in splendor. Dishes of roasted lamb, sweet dates, figs, and wine flowed freely. Haman, swollen with pride, drank deeply of the honor. To be invited not once but twice, to dine privately with the king and queen, surely no man in Persia was greater than he. His arrogance blinded him to the storm waiting on the horizon. Xerxes turned to Esther with affection in his eyes. "Tell me, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It shall be given to you. Even up to half of the kingdom it will be granted." The room seemed to hold its breath. Esther's hands trembled beneath the table. She lifted her eyes toward the king, then to Haman, whose smug smile stretched across his face. This was the moment. No more delays, no more silence. Taking a deep breath, Esther rose. Her voice was steady, though her heart thundered. "If I have found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases you, spare my life and spare the lives of my people, for we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as slaves, I would have kept silent. But this plot seeks our very extinction." The king's face darkened. Shock rippled through the room. Xerxes leaned forward, anger rising in his voice. "Who is he? Where is the man who dared to do such a thing?" Esther turned, her gaze fixed upon the man seated beside him. She pointed with a trembling but firm hand. "The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman." The words struck like lightning. The smug smile on Haman's face collapsed into terror. He stumbled back, his hands shaking. The king, enraged, rose from his seat and stormed into the palace garden, his thoughts a whirlwind of betrayal and fury. Haman, left with Esther, fell at her feet, begging for his life. But in his desperation, he leaned too close, clutching at the queen's couch. At that very moment, Xerxes returned. His eyes fell upon the scene, and rage consumed him. "Will he even assault the queen in my own house?" The words sealed Haman's fate. Guards rushed forward, covering his head in disgrace. One of them spoke. "A gallows 75 feet high stands at Haman's house. He had it built for Mordecai, the very man who spoke up to save the king." The irony struck with divine weight. Xerxes' fury flared. "Hang him on it." That very night, Haman was led to his own gallows. The rope that was meant for Mordecai wrapped around his own neck. His screams were swallowed by the night, and silence fell over Susa as the man who plotted death was consumed by the very trap he had built. But Esther knew though Haman was gone, the decree remained. The empire still carried the command sealed with the king's ring. Her people were still marked for slaughter. The battle was not yet finished. The night Haman fell, silence spread across Susa like a heavy shroud. Yet beneath that silence, the decree of death still lingered like an open wound. Though the enemy was gone, his venom remained sealed with the king's ring. Across the empire, the date of destruction still stood, written in countless scrolls and carried by swift horses to every province. Esther knew the victory was incomplete. Her people were still condemned, and unless the king himself acted, thousands of families would be slaughtered by their own neighbors. Summoning all her courage, Esther once more approached the throne. She bowed low, tears streaking her face. Her voice broke as she spoke. "If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor before you, let an order be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, which he wrote to destroy us in all the provinces of the king." Xerxes looked upon her, moved by her plea. Yet Persian law was iron. A decree sealed with the royal signet could not be revoked. Not even the king could erase it. The weight of that truth fell upon the whole. But then Xerxes turned to Mordecai, now dressed in royal robes, a new signet ring upon his hand, the ring once belonging to Haman. "Write another decree in my name, as seems best to you, concerning the Jews. Seal it with the king's ring, for what has been written in the king's name and sealed cannot be revoked, but another word can be added." And so Mordecai and Esther wrote a new command. Couriers mounted on swift horses spread it to every corner of the empire. The Jews were granted the right to assemble and defend themselves. On the day appointed for their destruction, they could rise against their enemies, strike down any who attacked them, and seize their possessions. When the decree reached the Jews of Susa, mourning turned to joy. Sackcloth gave way to celebration, ashes to songs of hope. In towns and villages, the Jews prepared, no longer as victims but as a people ready to stand. Fear spread among their enemies, for the favor of the queen and the power of Mordecai now stood behind them. On the appointed day, when their adversaries gathered, expecting slaughter, they found resistance instead. The Jews fought with courage, and victory spread across the provinces. In Susa itself, 500 of their enemies fell, and Haman's 10 sons were hanged upon the gallows he had raised in arrogance. The empire that once trembled under Haman's cruelty now echoed with a new sound, the sound of survival, of reversal, of life where death had been decreed. From that day onward, the Jews established a feast to remember. They called it Purim, for the lots Haman had cast to decide their fate. What had been meant for destruction became a story of deliverance. Each year, families would gather to read the scroll of Esther, to rejoice, to send gifts of food to one another, and to give to the poor so that no one would forget the day despair turned into triumph. And Esther, the orphan who became queen, remained in the palace, honored among her people and remembered by generations. She had risked her crown, her safety, and her life, and in doing so, she saved a nation. And so ends the story of Esther, the young orphan who became queen and risked everything to save her people. A story of courage, faith, and destiny. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel. We still have many moving biblical stories to share, stories of faith, of failures, of miracles, and of redemption that remain alive today.